Hello, this is the Headspring podcast. My name is Katie Martin. I'm a markets columnist at the Financial Times in London, and I'm here in the FT audio studios. And we're going to be talking today about the big stuff, geopolitics, and how that affects businesses and how business executives need to think about it. Now, luckily, I'm not here on my own. I am joined by Bjorn Beam, who is from Arcano Partners. Bjorn, thanks for coming to the FT.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here.
Tell me about Arcano Partners and tell me about your background because it really gives us some useful insights into how this big picture stuff really matters on a day-to-day basis.
Wonderful. So, my background to kind of bring this all together is for about 11 years, I was in the intelligence community at the CIA, helping policymakers understand what was changing in the world. And of course, I
Mm.
was doing more than that. I was in the field doing some stuff against North Korea, Al Qaeda, and some other interesting targets. That's for more of maybe a conversation over some drinks.
Yeah.
But with that, I ended up working, and now I've been building a profile for Arcano Partners to understand and help clients, help companies, help businesses, help countries for that matter, especially some NATO clients, understand the geopolitical, the technology realities that are shaping the environment, that's changing how they invest, how they strengthen their workforce, and how they actually not only survive, but thrive in this world.
We were talking about this at an event at the FT just recently with, executives in HR functions, and you might think to yourself, what's that got to do with all this? But there is a really direct line between how a lot of this works and what a lot of these, people do for a living. And I guess the key thread of our conversation was a lot of the old rules and institutions that we've grown up with and taken for granted are in a new place, and geopolitical alliances are in a new place, and everyone needs to be aware of how that all works. And I guess American exceptionalism is turning into something a bit like American normalization, and it's difficult for everybody, whether you're in government or regulation or central banking or business or journalism or whatever it is. You have to think differently about America's place in the world and where that leaves the rest of us. I suppose the most obvious expression of that that's going on at the moment is the war in Iran. So let's talk a little bit about that. It looks like there's a deal and there's a ceasefire. I'm just going to put a little pin in that and say we don't actually, no one actually knows what the status quo is right now. Um, but who do you think geopolitically has emerged as the big winner, if you like, of that conflict?
Well, I see two key winners to this conflict, and the big one being China, and the next one being Iran. In the attempt to make America great again,
Mm.
we have seen a revival of Chinese power because of the weakening of U.S. influence economically, militarily, and even from a social standpoint of what it means to see that American identity. All while Iran has been strengthened by realizing that it actually does have a nuclear bomb already.
Mm.
And it's not a nuclear bomb, it's the Strait of Hormuz.
Mm.
It is something that the CIA, the NSA, almost every intelligence agency around the world has said, guys, don't do this. This is going to happen. And these
Mm.
are going to be the fallouts. They're going to have a global ramification. So now we're seeing ourselves reshifting the order, reshifting power in ways that are not beneficial to many, if not
Yeah.
really anyone, other than China and Iran, that now are all of a sudden seeing a United States that's weaker, seeing allies that depended on the United States saying, wait a minute, are you in my corner now? And even if you want it to be, you don't have the resources to. A great example of this is when we look at actually a report done by CSIS before the war in Iran that said that the United States only had 1 week's worth of weaponry
Mm.
to actually, if they had to defend Taiwan and have a conflict with China. Again, not something we're hoping for, but if they did, like how would this play out? Clearly, with the amount of ammunition spent, the backlog now of production that's going to last till 2030 at the earliest,
Mm.
the U.S. is not capable to defend any of its allies, even if it wanted to. And that is altering the world's power in ways that we are not even fully beginning to understand as we see the interconnected nature of this conflict with Ukraine,
Mm.
connected with Iran, connected to what's going around Taiwan. All of these events are connected, and they even expand beyond that when we see just the ability of U.S. naval power to keep global commerce moving.
So, one of the key ways in which China has demonstrated its strategic advantage through the course of the conflict in Iran is, and again, this is why where it takes this down to a corporate level, is be like China, right? So the one of the ways in which China really did very well out of all this is it had enormous reserves of oil and of there's just energy materials going into this conflict now. All countries have strategic oil reserves, but China really went for it, and it was able to draw down those reserves before it's had any need to kind of tap into the global flow of energy around the world. It was very successful at that, and it was also able to say to neighboring countries, oh, hi Vietnam, hi Malaysia, you need some oil. We have some oil. I'm sure we could do some sort of mutually beneficial arrangement to make sure that you've got the energy that you need. And so they were able to use it as a geopolitical lever. And this is very China, right? So China is also, it's very keen to say to the world, oh, you guys all want solar now. We've got loads of solar. We've got solar panels sitting in warehouses. You want some solar? We can give you some solar. But in addition, you think back a few months, and they were able to say to the US, well, if you're going to hit us with punitive trade tariffs, then you need a lot of the rare earths that we happen to have stored up as well. So this sort of contingency work that China does, this sort of forward planning and thinking about worst case scenarios and how you can get yourself through it, that's where the rubber hits the road in terms of where this converts into what companies need to do.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Because China has been preparing for every possibility for a long time. They have
Mm.
a vision that outlasts the 2 year cycle in the United States in terms of political realities. They have the ability to say, where do we want to be in 50 years' time? And that allows for long term planning, but also the ability to build short term reactionary responses. The
Mm.
fact that China has a year's worth of oil in reserve is incredible. And the expansion they've been doing to also just expand every type of thing under the sun, clean and dirty, to just say we are going to bring the economic might to bear. Oh, and by the way, we're going to give free energy to those that want to build AI systems to compete with the world. They have mobilized the entire economy, the entire government, the entire ecosystem, are all around one direction, around one policy to make China great again.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this and you're still in that mindset where you think that China makes widgets for the world and it makes, low value consumer products for the world, and you're doing it wrong. China has leapfrogged the world in terms of technology in electric vehicles, in green energy. I think I'm right in saying it accounts for something like a third of all the global spending on green energy all happens in China. They really know what they're doing with this. So again, one of the things that came up in a recent conversation of ours was, okay, I get that the world has changed. I get that NATO is a different animal from what it previously was, and the UN is a different animal, and the US and the EU and all of that. I get that. But why does this matter to me as a corporate executive? And one example I brought up in relation to this was with it was about an executive at an Austrian firm who I was talking to recently, and he was saying when the war in Iran broke out, it turned out we had a lot of people, a lot of employees who were in UAE, Qatar, all around that region, and we did not hesitate. We wanted to get them and their families out of that region quickly. And what they did to get that done was they leveraged really long standing trust-based relationships with government, whether that's at home in Austria or in the Middle East. And again, that kind of contingency planning about what can possibly go wrong turned out to be incredibly valuable to them in giving peace of mind to their employees' families, and also I think to other employees of other companies even in the region. They were able to say, we've got this. If you want to get on our bus, you can get on our bus. Now, that's incredibly powerful, isn't it?
To me, that's the type of leadership that we need in this world of C-suite executives that understand that their people are a key resource to their ability to drive forward every aspect of who they are. And once you throw that away, once you lose that appreciation for your talent acquisition, and
Mm.
retaining these people who are the backbone of your company, you're losing that soul. You're losing that identity to be able to say, this is where we are, this is who we are, and this is what we stand for.
Because people remember that sort of
Yeah.
thing, don't they? They say, I know that when the going got tough, my boss had my back, and they got me out of this sticky situation. And again, when you're thinking about stuff that can go wrong, another thing that we spoke about at length at a recent event at the FT is about IT resilience. So again, if you're listening to this, this podcast, and you're thinking about IT, are you thinking about the huge numbers of threats to that? There are malign actors in Russia and all across the world that are desperately trying to hack systems. I think we all know that. But they also spread misinformation and disinformation. And on top of that, again, once we have come to this understanding that the US is not necessarily the friend and partner that we've always thought, is it plausible that one day there could be a break on Europe's ability to use US technology like Google, like Amazon Web Services, and like all of these AI tools that are kind of mostly born and bred in the US? Again, it's a tiny risk that something could go wrong there, but we live in a world where tiny risks are crystallizing all over the place. Again, what can corporate executives do about that massive suite of risks and threats?
Yeah, because you hit home two key parts there. The one, the disinformation, and the other, the infrastructure. And the disinformation one I want to break down a little further, because when you consider, we've been talking now for more than 5 seconds, right?
Hmm.
We've got a video of us as well.
Hmm.
All it takes is 5 seconds of our voice
Hmm.
to do a voice clone of us and one photo of us. So how are business leaders communicating with their employees to say, hey, how do you know when I call my chief of finance that it's actually me?
Yeah.
How do you communicate trust beyond what's being spread online, but being able to even say, hey, let's make sure we have at least our protocols in place, that when someone calls from one team to the other, that if it's not on our ecosystem, we can confirm who it is.
Mm.
Let alone if all of a sudden your family member's calling you and they're saying, hey, I just got in a car crash, and can you wire, X amount of
Mm.
pounds to this lawyer here so I can get out? This changes the dynamic completely with how we understand trust in society. So if a CEO of C-suite can say, let's at least make sure our people can trust our own message, can trust us as a source of knowledge, and the authenticity of our
Mm.
voice when it comes out, that it is truly us. And our customers can say, hey, yeah, I know that's that CEO because I've heard his voice. I see the timestamp. I see the special certification to this video. I know it's really him or
Mm.
her or whoever it may be. There's an element of, I think, now control that's re-given to the power that's created by being able to regain this ability of truthfulness and
Mm.
authenticity, which is missing.
The way that I know when I get texts that purport to be from my children saying, Mum, help, I need you to send me £100, the way that I know that it's not really them is it always says please. And there's no way on
Yeah.
God's green earth my, my kids would say please for that. But I get a related point to that is to my mind, it's really important for companies to think about what they are doing with images and voices of their employees in the public domain. So, for example, I've been very clear that I don't want my image used on X. There's a lot of nudify apps on there. This is not something that I want in my life. It's not a platform that I choose to use. So I always say to people, please don't use my image on that platform. You want to put it on LinkedIn? Fine. You want to put it on Blue Sky? That's fine. I don't care. But, again, it's important for employers to be conscious that people have limits and they have personal choices about where they want to appear in the public domain. And that's a tricky one for companies to deal with, isn't it?
Yeah, because that starts with an agreement with where you want to actually
Mm.
direct this security, where you want to say this is how we're going to project ourselves, and how do you educate your staff. Again, people are still thinking, oh, well, this isn't a problem. I don't care that a photo of me's out. I don't care that okay, my password maybe is leaked because it's not my bank account detail. We need to start with that education at all levels. I mean, beyond teaching our kids this,
Mm.
building that understanding of truly, resiliency
Mm.
in this digital space, digital hygiene, but also saying, all right, where are our personal limits that we want to set up as our value system that we don't, if we do release this information, there is this risk.
Mm.
And to protect all employees, let's make sure that we are not doing X, Y, and Z to help add that extra security. And I think that's the key part because I mean we haven't even touched the fact that this is all just what we are giving out freely, not what actually someone can get from us. When you add in the fact that 80% of cyber breaches are because of human error, someone
Mm.
clicking on a link that looks perfect, or maybe it looks really legitimate because AI has designated it specifically for you based off of all the information they have out there, and this customized automated attacks of AI is allowing people to get information that previously some people wouldn't have given up.
Yeah.
And that's expanding this whole the surface of this cyber threat.
And I guess you have to create an environment as well where people feel like they can put their hand up and say, I've made a mistake, I've clicked a link. Because these things are so convincing now. And you don't want to have that environment where people think, I'm going to get fired, or everyone's going to think I'm an idiot, or, whatever it is. Some of these things are so hard to spot. It could be, there but for the grace of God. That's a trust thing for companies, isn't it?
Yeah, because I mean, you want them to come forward and say, "I made this mistake," and let
Mm.
them know that it's okay. And even too, I mean, there's our companies are doing penetration testing to send out these fake messages, and if all of a sudden someone does click on it, it becomes, "Hey, this happened. This is how you fell for it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have a conversation here, and let's be aware that anyone can fall for this." But what can we do to try to mitigate this? And of
Mm.
course, installing the right AI solutions on the back end from the cybersecurity side, but being able to have that conversation honestly that this is a threat. And that requires, I think this comes back to the bigger conversation here of building this leadership mindset for C suite executives, for HR leaders to say we need to make sure our whole entire staff understands the way the world's moving, the
Yeah.
geopolitical, the economic, the technology risk, all coming together. So when things are coming their way, they understand what the implications of that may be in their personal and professional life.
Yeah. But also, I guess it's fostering this sense that, again, the company's got your back. It's thought about all of these risks and threats. It's thought about these resiliency and contingency issues, and that just enables staff to get on with what they do best, right? In theory, for me, is writing articles and doing podcasts and that sort of thing. I shouldn't be spending my time worrying about IT security. So, again, when you're talking to the C-suite and you're advising a lot of these executives, for you, what are the main geopolitical risks that you're saying to them? You have to know about this.
Yeah, the big one is just the interconnected nature of these AI cyber threat risk, especially when we talk about quantum computing. Now, we can spend a whole entire podcast series trying to explain quantum computing.
And I still won't understand it.
Yeah, but the simple way I think I like to say it and use this analogy that I think is fair is if you understand how Trump thinks, you understand quantum computing. You understand the idea that something can be daylight, it can be nighttime, it can be daytime and nighttime at the same time. That's the nature very quickly of how quantum particles work. The idea that you can have multiple states at once, but simply in a post quantum world that we are in right now, the ability of someone to quickly decrack or decrypt
Hmm.
everything at once without a problem is putting a big threat on companies with their data. And so one of the key things is first of all, just build a post quantum encryption network.
But also, the AI poses a similar potential threat as well. We've been talking about Mythos, which is this supposed kind of, superstar AI, um, you know, system, I guess, that comes from Anthropic, and this has had governments and moreover companies pouring all over it to figure out okay, what vulnerabilities is this thing going to find, and what kind of, hacking potential is there here, and how do we switch off all of those potential inlets? It's almost like that AI cyber threat has leapfrogged the quantum cyber threat, and again has to be on that list of things that people are thinking about.
Yes, it has leapfrogged it, but they're combining, they're merging, and that's the risk. So at some point, is a company going to be able to find and deal with all of the vulnerabilities that are in Microsoft Word
Mm.
or any Microsoft product? They're, of course, going to have their cyber defense solutions. They're going to basically fight fire with fire, install these AI solutions as well to look at the code, look at the security, and that runs automatically. That takes the stress out of your life. To say
Mm.
we're going to adapt, in this case, Mythos or the version Fable, if you if you can get access to it, or whatever will come next, because it's what's coming
There's
next is
always
this.
something
There's
next.
always
Yeah.
something next, and it's moving faster and faster. And being able to adapt that and say, all right, we will build an AI firewall system that will look for vulnerabilities, actively scan our
Mm.
network, identify them, and patch them.
So, and again, it's worth thinking if you're in, like HR or accounts or anything like that. It's worth thinking about worst case scenarios. So, you know, is there a universe in which something could be switched off at a data center somewhere, or on a cloud somewhere, that suddenly means that you can't make payroll? Because that is every company's worst nightmare. So I know it sounds kind of pie in the sky and kind of, almost like disaster porn, but it is worth thinking about, like, what would we do? Like, where are those vulnerabilities, and what contingencies can we build in? Because again, you are not going to have a productive workforce if there's a genuine threat to their money hitting their account every month.
You may not even be able to get into the building of your office,
Yeah.
depending on the company actually running the key card system. I mean, think about the power change that occurs with this. And that goes exactly back to the initial
Mm.
key risk of the overdependence of the world on US tech.
Yeah.
We have built an entire ecosystem off of Silicon Valley solutions, which, let's be honest, they're great solutions.
Super.
But the problem is, because of US regulations and US spying patterns, there's always been backdoors in these solutions. It's been backdoors for good reasons, to go after people moving drugs, people in cartels, people doing, child porn. There is a good reason for some of these, but the nature of it has been weaponized in this
Mm.
administration and is further being weaponized and has really always been there. I mean, that's the thing. The U.S. intelligence community, in the world of intelligence, there are no friends.
Yeah.
As close as the British are to the United States, or vice versa, in reality, in the world of intelligence, everyone wants to know really what's going on back in D.C. behind the closed doors, or what's also going on at 10 Downing, if there's a meeting
Mm.
that has value on what this means for the direction of how U.S. relationships may play out. So there's always been that component, but now we've moved into this new transactionary nature of politics. We've moved into
Hmm.
this, I'd say kind of, feudal phase, this new post-feudal phase, or not post-feudal, feudal phase, where all of a sudden it's the return of little fiefdoms, where, the United States is looking out for its own interest. Everyone is truly looking out for its own interest, which was always the case, but it's been so explicit now that now the question is, are we going to see the weaponization of the intelligence community, which
Mm.
has the regulation there in place, to say, all right, we're going to access, the bank accounts of what's going on in the UK because we want to see what's going on. Or, by the way, yeah, actually, we do want to just shut down the ability of all these systems to work in this country because they didn't actually play
Mm.
well with us at this last meeting.
Yeah.
And that's a huge risk for
I
the
mean,
world.
it's a tiny, tiny possibility, but the impact would be, pretty severe. Okay, so the first one is IT and all of those vulnerabilities. I guess the second one would be a, around that point of contingency and resiliency. So I think one, big sort of pat on the back for, for companies around the world is, particularly since COVID, people woke up to supply chain risks, and they woke up to, hang on, where are our people, where are our manufacturing bases, where is our data? Honestly, we kind of didn't think about that before COVID, and then we had to, and that meant that when Iran came along, actually a lot of the a lot of the tail risks didn't come to light because people had already done that forward planning. They'd brought manufacturing home. They'd thought about this in more detail. But is there more work to do on that given the geopolitical environment, do you think?
Oh, there's so much work to be done in this. And it's part because of the complicated nature of our economy. Even if you're bringing some things back, you still have a supply chain that's getting components from different parts around the world that still is dependent on the ability to actually source external goods. And then, of course, the challenges that we're seeing. I mean, I think one of the examples we mentioned during the event is still China and Taiwan.
Mm.
90% of the most advanced semiconductors come from there. And we're talking about under 2 nanometers, which is, a good example is your hair growing 2 seconds. It's just really small, really precise. It's not easy to replicate.
No.
And we still depend on that. We can't move that over quickly. And even with the United States plans to move it back domestically, that's going to take more than a decade.
Mm.
And even if that is the case, it's still going to take much longer. So it's to understand, to really quantify, qualify your entire supply chain. And one of the biggest things I do with companies, I just say, hey, first of all, I need to know, like, what do you know about your business? Like, let's actually scratch at the
Right.
surface. Like, where are your goods? Where are your people? Where are you acquiring the parts you need for your goods? Oh,
Yeah.
and by the way, where are the mines that are needed to make that material? Literally going, we can spend a very long time or a very short time, but usually it takes a very long time of diving through what we actually know
Yeah.
about the company. And once you map that out visually, you have a whole new sense of what this company is. It
It,
may be only based in the UK, but then all of a sudden you realize this is actually an international firm because of
yeah.
everything.
Yeah. No, 100%. The FT's done a lot of work on this actually. It's like, okay, turns out we've all become experts on the Strait of Hormuz. Are are you an expert on all the other maritime pinch points around the world? Because there's loads of them.
Yeah.
And how reliant are you on each of them? It's almost to me like, I don't know how a toilet works. I just know that it does. But someone somewhere has got to know the real details about the mechanics of this thing. And that's the C-suite's job,
Yeah.
like to my mind, is to really understand the plumbing, the guts of this thing, which bit goes where, what are the bits that are most likely to break. And once someone else is looking after that, then you just don't get the same catastrophes.
Exactly. And this is the part where it's the C suite's job to understand the entire network
Yeah.
and to also remove that stress from the layers underneath. To say, all right, we have it under control. We understand how our company operates. We understand how these pieces are made.
Mm.
And we also have built some redundancy in.
Mm.
So don't worry, guys. And by the way, it's on a shelf. We have this plan on a shelf here. And maybe it's not the perfect plan, but at least once the event comes, we can do a little bit of a mix between this, a little bit of that, add a little extra seasoning in from over here, and now okay, this is what we're gonna do.
Yeah. Now, what we don't want people to do is listen to a podcast like this and think, holy moly, we're screwed. There's just so much risk out there. I don't know what we can do about it. I can't fully protect myself from cyber attack, from all of these different sort of swirling menaces. So, how do companies achieve that sort of level of state of mind and just think we're sort of ready enough? How do you get to that point where you're like, we've done what we can?
Right. So first of all, it comes through mapping the initial structure, knowing what we are, knowing what we know, knowing what we think we know, knowing what we don't know, and knowing what's unknowable.
Yeah.
Going back to Rumsfeld there a little bit
Yeah.
with the unknowable, the
The
unknown
no-
piece there. But the idea is truly say, okay, if we don't know the future of this one problem, and how the war in Ukraine exactly will end, let's put that in the unknowable. But let's at least know what we know, what we think we know, and what if we did a little digging, we could probably get to kind of a better understanding of what's
Mm.
not like what a little research can help us find.
Yeah.
And that helps move that forward there. And then you say, all right, okay, so how do these different events that we're dealing with, we're seeing in the modern environment of everything being interconnected, how do we say, okay, which ones are going to have a second and third implication?
And which ones also present opportunities? Let's never forget that,
Opportunities. Yeah,
right?
this is all about opportunities. What may be bad for some others may be a great opportunity for you. I mean, a perfect example right now is, a company that probably is selling pasta is probably doing pretty well right now.
Mm.
They're probably all of a sudden saying, "Hey, I can make, the hamburger helper, the quick meal for people who on the lower cost of the spectrum. It's probably selling off the shelf a little more as the cost of inflationary products are going up.
Yeah.
So
But
there's a
also,
benefit there.
you think again of this really toxic disinformation environment, being selfish. People think, okay, I need like news and information that I can trust. And the FT is very willing to like wave a pink flag in the air and say, we're right here,
Yeah.
guys. You can trust us. So there is an opportunity in every threat, I guess. It just can be difficult when you're in that kind of chaotic fog to see where those opportunities actually lie. And I guess that's also part of what you do in your conversations with executives.
It is, and the biggest part, and this sounds like let's move this from geopolitics and technology to a bit of mental awareness and mindfulness here, a little with a little yoga, but half of it is like, all right, guys, let's take a moment, let's pause, let's think, let's breathe. What is going on?
Mm,
How has this impacted us? What can we do, and what can't we do?
yeah.
Because
And what do
yeah,
our employees expect of us, and what do our customers expect of us, and how can we make sure we do the best job for both of those sets of people, all of our stakeholders?
and communicating it to all of them in the right way. I mean, this all comes back to if you can understand what's going on and you can communicate it properly, you're controlling the message.
Yeah,
And then this
yeah,
day of information flow, it is about controlling the message.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
I guess that brings us to our key points from our discussion today. The first point is knowledge. If you don't understand where your risks and opportunities are, then all bets are off. The second is resilience, and that comes from that knowledge, and that's about I know where my pinch points are, and these are the bits of contingency that I'm building up around that. The third point is, I know this sounds wishy-washy, but it is that authenticity thing that you were talking about. How do I know that I'm talking to Bjorn? And if you call me tomorrow and I can't see you, how do I still know that it's Bjorn? You email me again, how do I know that it's Bjorn? If you don't have that sort of trust that runs throughout an organization, then a lot of other things go wrong too. And I guess my fourth point would be, it is about trust and it is about goodwill. If you demonstrate to employees that we will look after you when bad stuff happens, whether that's to you personally or to the company as a whole, or because of some external event that we can't control, we've got your back. That's gold dust, because that builds real loyalty from staff and from customers, in my experience. Am I missing any? Is this a decent framework to move
that
forward?
is, yeah, that is a great framework because I think the last one is so important, especially when the workforce is worried about the changes in AI, geopolitics. If you can say, look, this is how we're seeing this is how we're approaching this, and this is how we're doing it together,
Yeah. And
you know,
stuff is going to
it's
change,
gonna, yeah.
and that might pose some challenges. And, we can't pretend to everybody that every job is secure forever, because there are some that will get chewed up by AI. But if you have that, I guess, that trust environment to start with, then that makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, you're building from a foundation of honesty, of the reality, and adding clarity, and that's what's separating the disinformation from the reality that you are building and understanding and perceiving.
Yeah, good stuff. Bjorn, thank you so much for coming back to FT Towers and talking to me in the basement here in the audio studio. I really appreciate it. If you've been listening, I hope you have found that helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.